尽大的善听，为四法为给予界众生，经转妙法轮，教导我们如何疗伤或死苦的了。速战无山。Will the Sangha with great virtue out of compassion for the sake of this assembly and all living beings, please turn the wonderful Dharma wheel to teach us how to leave suffering and attain bliss and end birth and death and quickly realize non-birth.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Namo sadanto suchetoye alahati sanmiao sanputo che. 无上甚深微妙法，百千万劫难遭遇。我今见闻得受持，愿解如来真实义。Supreme and wondrous Dharma, subtle and profound, rarely is encountered, even in a billion eons. But now we see and hear it and accept it reverently. May we truly understand the Buddha's actual meaning. Namo, quelling disasters, slanting life, medicine master, Buddha. 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 Medicine master does come one, medicine master does come one, medicine master does come one, medicine master does come one. Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, excuse me, Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Venerable Master, and all good knowing advisors, welcome back to our exploration of the Dharma using the Medicine Master Buddha Sutra as our foundation. Today we are at class lecture number 113. We've been doing this at least 113 times, and I received a email the other day. Someone did not know that we had changed our times for our new class. For a few months now. So I'm putting up this slide for them. So where we are today, wait, before we start, do we have any questions from anyone? No questions? You can unmute your mic or you can type it into the chat box. I know Ron has a question from 2 weeks ago and for today, which I'll address at towards the end of the class. So where we are today is we are speaking on the practice of being mindful of the Buddha. Why? Because for those of you who have taken refuge with the Buddha, or who see the Buddha as your teacher or one of your teachers, then there is a practice that we can do, but the excuse me, the practice is only available to us if we know who the Buddha is. Not know who the Buddha is as in, oh, I know the historical Buddha, I know his life story, not in that sense, but knowing, becoming more familiar with who the Buddha actually is, how he became to be the Buddha, what makes him the Buddha, what were the vows that a Buddha makes. For example, Amitabha Buddha, we know his 48 vows. For Shakyamuni Buddha, I'm not aware of his vows. I haven't come across his vows. I'm not sure if it's available, but that's one way of getting to know our teacher. And the practice of being mindful of the Buddha, if you accept the Buddha as your teacher, then what happens is that it gives you a sense of comfort, that of who you are following. Okay, and when there's a practice also, there's also another practice regarding the Buddha. It's called praises to the Buddha. If you ever been to any monastery, Buddhist monastery, and part of their ceremonies, there will be a part where they have praises sung of the Buddha. And in reality, so that's in a ceremony, it's kind of scripted, but in reality, the praises that we have, that we adapt into our ceremonies, they come more or less in a very spontaneous way. People, when they see the Buddha, or when they get a teaching from the Buddha, or they gain this state of awakening after the Buddha's teachings, something profound happens that moves them to praise the Buddha. They, is how would I? What's the word? It's like when you've eaten some dessert, or some dish that is really really good, and you can't help but exclaim out loud, "Oh, this is so great!" Or you think to yourself, "Oh, I want to have this again. I can eat this every single day, and I'll never tire of it." I'm sorry, I don't have a better example, but something like that, except that this is for your teacher. That's where praises in the ceremonies come from. So praises in the sutras come from. People encounter the Buddha, they get a sense of who the Buddha actually is, because of the Buddha's awesome everything, as we shall find out. They are spontaneously moved to praise the Buddha. Okay, all right. So today, what I have for you is from the Lali Tavistara Sutra. Let me move on. This sutra is all about how the Buddha came to become the. No, not all about how the Buddha. It's about how before he became the Buddha, when he was a bodhisattva, his journey to the heaven, and when he decided then it was the right time to come down to Jambudvipa, or you could say to earth, and embark to be reborn here and become the Buddha. Okay, all right. So I'm just going to, maybe I'm not sure how much I'm going to provide a commentary, but the reason I'm sharing this is because it provides, this is the Buddha himself speaking. He talks about himself, okay? But he's explaining to the monks who he was as he went for rebirth in the heaven, and the qualities that he had as of one benefiting the next Buddha, the Buddha to come. So he's talking about his past. And I just want, if possible, as you are listening, to pay close attention to the way the Buddha describes himself, to the accomplishments that he has made, and to see if you know of anyone, in history, whether you know them personally or not, probably not personally, but any figure in history that you know of, whether real or not, it could be fiction, someone fictional. But have you ever come across someone who's been described in this way? Okay. Because I think that the reason why the Buddha shares this is to show that beings at that level are not normal people. They are their qualities of virtue, their kindness, their compassion, their regard for living beings, their wisdom, their mastery over themselves is very, very far beyond what even we can imagine, and not something that we can do for other living beings for a sustained period. We may be able to emulate the Buddhas for a very short time, but to carry it out day in, day out, to match the Buddha is going to be really tough, very hard indeed. So I just want everyone to not not to pay close attention, and to really let the virtues or the qualities of the Bodhisattva before he became the Buddha to sink in. Okay, because when I read this with a different mindset, I found it to be really special. And when they say the Buddha is without peer, there's no one that can compare to the Buddha, you'll see why. Okay, so this is just a small section, but it is going to take up our whole class for today. So the Buddha says, monks, the Bodhisattva, meaning himself, before he became the Buddha, dwell in the supreme realm of the heaven of joy. This is the, if I'm not mistaken, this is the Tushita heaven, but I can confirm by the end of the class, where he was honored by offerings, received consecration, and was praised and revered by 100,000 gods. He had achieved his goal and was elevated by his former aspirations. His intelligence was such that he had gained the entire range of the Buddha Dharma. Indeed, his eye of wisdom was at once both vast and utterly pure. Radiating with mindfulness, intelligence, realization, modesty, and joyfulness, his mind was extremely powerful. He had mastered the perfections of generosity, discipline, patience, diligence, mental stability, knowledge, and skillful means, and was adept in the fourfold path of Brahma: great love, great compassion, great joy, and great equanimity. That's the four Brahma Viharas, which is actually our topic. With great awareness, he was free of obscurations and had manifested the vision of wisdom free from attachment. Likewise, he had perfected each and every quality of awakening, which are the applications of mindfulness, the Tara relinquishments, the basis of miraculous power, the faculties, the powers, the branches of awakening, and the path. Sublime signs and marks, indicating his boundless accumulation of merit and wisdom, beautifully adorned the body of the Bodhisattva, who had engaged in proper conduct for a long time. Acting in perfect accordance with his words, his unerring statements were always genuine. At once honest, straightforward, and free of guile, his mind was invincible. Free of pride, conceit, arrogance, fear, and timidity, he was impartial towards all living beings, toward all beings. If you have been following me so far, usually when in say other beliefs, when they talk about the figures of authority, there's something in there that makes you that there might be a reason to have a bit of fear or submission, you know, and is more or less because your destiny is somewhat controlled by them, and you have to do things to fit their idea of what constitutes a good person. But so far, if you look at how the Buddha has described himself, it is very, very different. The qualities are someone who you want to draw close to, is someone you want to please out of happiness, not out of fear, and is someone who represents the best of I would say that, like, the human qualities. There's no wrath, no jealousy, but it's a very soft, it's like it's someone you can trust. It's someone you can trust 100%. You can place yourself in their responsibility, and don't feel as if your happiness will be compromised. Okay, all right. The Bodhisattva had paid homage to countless awakened beings, to billions upon billions of Buddhas. Having perfectly discerned their every word, the Bodhisattva's learned understanding of the teachings was at once unimpeded, discerning, and perfect. He was an unerring vessel of mindfulness, able to recall the teachings of all the Buddhas. The number of dharanis he had received was infinite. The Bodhisattva was a great captain of the vessel of the Dharma, which he had perfectly accomplished through the applications of mindfulness, the thorough relinquishments. Let me continue. The basis of miraculous power, the faculties, the powers, the branches of awakening, the path, the perfection of knowledge, the precious quality of skillful means and merit. This list, some of which you will, in the Amitabha Sutra, when we get to the Pure Land, these are the things that we study there. Okay, continuing, he said, with the intention to travel beyond the 4 rivers, he conquered Mara, subdued hostile forces, and defeated all of his opponents. This great being was like a lotus, having a stem of great compassion deeply rooted in the mind of awakening. This lotus was born of superior intention. It was sprinkled with the water of profound diligence, and had skillful means at its center, branches of awakening for its anthers, and mental stability for its stamen. This lotus arose from an immaculate ocean of a vast accumulation of virtues. Its blossoming petals, illuminated by moonlight, free from the torment of pride and arrogance, were pristine. Emitting the scent of discipline, study, and conscientious speech, unheeded throughout the 10 directions, this lotus was foremost throughout the world in terms of knowledge, yet untainted by the 8 worldly concerns. It radiated the sweet fragrance of the accumulation of merit and wisdom, while the sunlight of knowledge and wisdom warmed it, causing the 100 petals of its pure wisdom to blossom. The Bodhisattva was a lion among men. Swift and strong were his 4 bases of miraculous power, just as the claws and fangs of the 4 noble truths were extremely sharp. He bared the fangs of the 4 communions with Brahma and gathered others through the 4 ways of attraction with his head. With a well-proportioned body, due to having understood the 12 links of dependent origination, and a flowing mane of the complete perfection of the 37 branches of awakening, along with awareness and wisdom, his mouth opened with the 3 gateways to liberation, while his eyes indicated the utter purity of tranquility and insight. He dwelt in the mountain caves of mental stability, complete liberation, absorption, and deep meditation. Born of the jungles of the 4 activities and discipline, he was endowed with the 10 powers, the 4-fold fearlessness, and perfect mind. The hairs on his body did not bristle with the fear of creation and destruction, nor did his valor ever diminish. He subdued the masses of extremists who are like rabbits and deer, letting out the great lion's roar of no self. The great Bodhisattva was followed by a 4-fold retinue, like the moon by the 4 continents, and he was endowed with the jewels of the 7 branches of awakening. He engaged all beings equally and possessed an unimpeded analytical capacity. His intention was enhanced by the sublime and perfectly complete austerities and spiritual practices that he observed on the path of the 10 virtuous activities. As the king of Dharma, he turned the precious wheel of the supreme Dharma without hindrance, having been born into a line of universal monarchs. Filled with all the precious teachings, including that of dependent origination, so profound and difficult to fathom, he never tired of study. Thus his boundless wisdom had become vast and all-encompassing. His discipline was beyond measure as well. Indeed, his mind was as vast as the oceans and the earth. Equal to earth, water, fire, and air, his mind was as firm and unmoving as Mount Meru, or sometimes translated as Mount Sumeru. He was free from attachment and aversion, and with a mind as pristine and open as the center of space. It was vast and unlike any other. His superior intent was utterly pure. His acts of generosity were well done, as were his previous endeavors and his superior deeds. Okay, so I just thought of something and I thought I want to share. So in the Buddha land, okay, which is where you find one Buddha, there's a Buddha per Buddha land, and there is 1 billion worlds. All right, so the world we are in is 1 out of 1 billion of Shakyamuni Buddha's Buddha land. All right, that's the universe, Shakyamuni Buddha's universe that we are in. So at this point in time, of this 1 billion worlds, with all the humans and all the spiritual beings, all the devas in the heavens and the brahmas in the higher heavens, there was no one as accomplished as the Bodhisattva, the future Buddha. Okay, so for the Buddha to describe himself in this way is not hyperbole. He's not exaggerating. He's not. He's being very matter of fact. He's just saying things as it is. All right. Okay. Let's continue. He sought out all basic virtues and had formed positive habitual tendencies. Ascertaining the basic virtues, he practiced all such virtues for 7 incalculable eons. He practiced the 7 forms of generosity and engaged in the 5 types of action that create merit, just as he tread the path of the 10 virtues, which are the 3 physical, the 4 verbal, and the 3 mental wholesome actions, and practiced the 40 kinds of correct application. Likewise, did he make the 40 kinds of correct aspiration, immerse himself in the 40 kinds of right intention, perfect the 40 kinds of liberation, and erect the 40 kinds of right interest. He took ordination with 4 million Buddhas and presented 5.5 million Buddhas with offerings. Similarly, the Bodhisattva served 1,540 million solitary Buddhas, otherwise known as Pratyeka Buddhas. Establishing innumerable sentient beings on the paths to the higher realms and liberation, he desired to become perfectly and completely awakened, to attain supreme, genuine, and complete awakening. With only 1 lifetime remaining, he passed away and was reborn in the supreme realm of the heaven of joy as a supreme divine child named Sweta Ketu. So the heaven of joy is the triumph, is the Tushita heaven, okay, which is where our future Buddha, which is now Maitreya Bodhisattva, is also residing. And Maitreya Bodhisattva is also going to follow the same steps. Apparently, it's like a script. All Buddhas follow the same script. There's a plan. I wouldn't call it a plan. It's just the natural way how things unfold. And Maitreya Bodhisattva will also undergo the same sequence of events, more or less the same, I think. And I bet not many of you knew before he became the Buddha I mean, not as a prince, but in his past life. Yeah, his name. So now we know Sweta Ketu, the Deva Sweta Ketu. Okay, moving on. The assembly of gods showed him great reverence, honoring him as one who would leave their midst and take birth in the human world, where before long he would become the Buddha, attaining perfect, complete, and unexcelled awakening. So the gods there already knew who he was and who he was going to be. The Bodhi, okay, so there's some parts of the sutra which is very long, which I skipped. So now we come to the part where he's getting ready. He's announcing that it's time for him to be reborn on earth. He says, the Bodhisattva then said, monks, in 12 years, the Bodhisattva shall enter the womb of his mother. At that time, the gods from the pure realms ventured to Jambudvipa. Hiding their divine forms, they took on the guise of priests and taught the Vedas to other priests. They made it known that one who entered the womb in this manner would be a great being possessed of 32 marks. Okay, so this is where it gets interesting. Remember I shared with you, it was this class, about how the Vedas came about, where how people knew about Lord Brahma, and they said that Lord Brahma was God. It was because Lord Brahma was reborn in the heavens of the first dhyana, and he was there for a very long time because the lifespans there are impossibly long to imagine. So he was dwelling there for a very long time, enjoying his very blissful state, and then a thought occurred to him. He said, oh, it would be nice if more people could come and join me. And at that precise moment, okay, suddenly other gods appeared. And they and him had the same thought. They both thought that it was because of his mind moving, wanting other beings, that he created those beings. So those beings took him to be their creator. And when one of those beings died, the being was reborn on earth, became a monk, learned how to meditate, and could recall his previous life, just one life. Okay, he could recall his previous life, and he remembered he was a god in this heaven, and how Lord Brahma created them, and that he would also remember that Lord Brahma, I think there are about 1,000 Lord Brahmas in every Buddha land. So Lord Brahma would look down, okay, and he would see like 1,000 lands, 1,000 worlds under him. So 1,000, 1,001, or maybe he could see 10,000. I don't know. It's those are numbers that doesn't really make a difference to our practice. If anyone's interested, ask me later and I'll try to find out. But what happens is this: they see Lord Brahma as the Lord Creator of all, as the ruler of everything, because they can look down and see all the worlds beneath them. And so by remembering his past life, he starts teaching people about who Lord Brahma is. And that's how the religion came about. Okay. So now what we have are other Brahma gods who, when the Buddha, when the Bodhisattva announced he was going to come to earth, what they did was they prepared mankind so that when the Buddha came, they would have the necessary knowledge to understand how significant this person was. So they came down, the Brahma gods came down to, okay, hold on. Okay, can someone please send Saha the Zoom meeting address, because she's trying to join, but she cannot. She's unable to join. I think she just sent a message out. Okay, let me try. Okay, I just sent it to her. Okay, all right. So where were we? I got distracted. Okay, yeah. So the Brahma gods got reborn on Earth and on Jambudvipa, and started teaching the priest level class of people the Vedas. And part of what they taught was that when you, it's like how, in movies they have prophecies, those movies of magic and all that. They say, oh, there's a prophecy that foretold that a man or woman would be born with certain characteristics, or be able to do certain things, and they shall unite the land or defeat the evil or whatever it is. Same thing. They taught the priests that in the future someone is going to be born, and they will have the 32 marks. And then in the next slides you will see what's the significance of the 32 marks. And that's how they laid the ground for because beings were ignorant at that time. As far as we were concerned in our history, there was no Buddha, there was no Dharma, and so they would not, in their recorded history, have any how do you say any way to know anything like that. Okay. So the priests, they came down as other priests, disguised as other priests. They taught the Vedas. Okay, and then what else did they teach? They said someone with such marks would become one of two things. There would be no third option. If such an individual were to live as a householder, he would become a universal monarch with a fourfold army. He would become a conqueror, a righteous Dharma king. Such a king would have the 7 treasures, which are the precious wheel, the precious elephant, the precious horse, the precious jewel, the precious wife, the precious steward, and the precious minister. With these words, the gods inspired the priests to recite the Vedas. Okay, so a few months ago, in one of our classes before, when we were at the realm of, I think it was humans, the highest position a human can get. Okay, if you are a human who has perfected your virtues, your kindness, your compassion, you have perfected it to the level of the highest that a human can possibly have. This is where you go. You become a world-turning king, a righteous Dharma king. And we went through all the different things that the 7 treasures could do. Like the elephant can fly, they can not only just fly, but he can fly and bring the whole army together with the king, for example. What else, if I can remember? He unites. He's a conqueror, but he doesn't unite the entire world with force. What happens is when he meets the other kings, they are so moved by him, they trust that their well-being under him will be taken care of, that all the kings in the world voluntarily submit to under his rule. Yeah, because they know that he will make good decisions for them and their people. Okay. All right, then moving on. In a similar manner, other gods arrive in Jambudvipa to exhort the solitary Buddhas. These are the Prachika Buddhas. Noble ones, they said, give up this Buddha realm. In 12 years' time, the Bodhisattva will enter the womb of his mother. So what are Prachika Buddhas, or solitary enlightened Buddhas? These are meditators. Okay, these people are meditators who, without the benefit of the Dharma to guide them, what they do is they start observing nature. They start observing their own mind, and and then they discover the 12 conditionings or dependent origination, and they end birth and death. So arhats, on the other hand, end birth and death with the benefit of the Dharma through penetration of the 4 noble truths. To them, that the 4 truths become noble, so they are known as arhats. But when there's no Dharma in the world and you're left to your own, the natural course is to observe the way things unfold in the mind, and that's called dependent origination. So what happened was, I just continue reading. So monks at that time, there was a solitary Buddha named Matanga who dwelt on Mount Golangula Paravatana in the city of Rajaga. Hearing the exhortation of the gods, he became as still as mud resting upon a boulder, then rose upon into the sky to the height of 7 tala trees. Merging with the fire element like a torch, he passed into nirvana. So what happens if meditators, when they reach a certain state, especially if you have already ended birth and death, you are able to what's the word for it? When you set fire to yourself, is it exhume? No, exhume is you dig someone up from the grave, right? You immolate, where you set yourself on fire, but you do it through through the powers of concentration. Okay, and you can also do that incidentally without burning yourself. You can, one of the supernatural feats that the Buddha performed, one of the very, very few supernatural feats the Buddha performed was he emitted fire from the lower part of his body and water from the upper part, and then he switched it around by emitting water from the lower part and fire from the upper part. According to Shofu, when the Sutra in 42 sections was taken to China, and when the Taoist priests challenged the Buddhist priests, that what happened as well too. They performed that feat. Okay, anyway, coming back to this, it is, I don't know the actual reasons, but it is said when there's a Buddha that is to appear in the world, anyone who's enlightened, not to the extent of the Buddha enlightened, but like a Pratyeka Buddha, they all leave the world. Yeah. I'm not exactly sure why, but in this sutra, it describes how, for example, this particular Pratyeka Buddha does it. Then his bowel and phlegm, ligaments and bones and flesh and blood were completely consumed by fire, leaving nothing but a few relics on the ground. Even today, they are known as the footprints of the sage. Monks at this time, 500 solitary Buddhas were assembled in a deer park outside Varanasi. They too heard the exhortation of the gods, rose up into the sky to the height of 7 tala trees, and turning into fire, passed into nirvana like a torch. From this point on, the area came to be known as Risipatana, or the Hill of the Fallen Sages. The area also came to be known as Margadawa, or the Deer Park, since deer frolic there without fear. So now we go back to the Bodhisattva. Monks, the Bodhisattva engaged in 4 great examinations. What were these for? He examined the time of his birth, the continent of his birth, the country of his birth, and the family of his birth. And why, monks, did the Bodhisattva examine the time of his birth? So obviously the Buddha is not going to be, the future Buddha is not going to be reborn like how we get reborn, where we have no control whatsoever. It's like we are rolling a dice and we don't even know where the dice will land, not to mention the number. Obviously for the Bodhisattva, it's very different. So it says, because a Bodhisattva does not enter his mother's womb at the beginning of time when sentient beings are evolving. I guess because they don't know how to appreciate the Dharma at the time. Rather, it is when the world has formed and when birth, old age, sickness, and death have become known that the Bodhisattva enters his mother's womb. Okay, forgive the last 3 words, there's a typo. So basically, is when they can appreciate the Dharma. Okay, when birth, old age, and sickness and death have become known. Just like how when, as a prince, he encountered old age, sickness, and death, and that was the wake-up call that he needed to leave the palace and finally become the Buddha. Same goes for everyone else. Just that we are surrounded by it, but it doesn't have seem to have any impact on us. Says, then the Buddha continues, he says, and why, monks, did the Bodhisattva examine the continent of his birth? Because a Bodhisattva is not born in an outlying continent, nor is he born on the eastern continent of Purva Videha, or on the western continent of Aparagodaniya, or on the northern continent of Uttara Kuru. Rather, a Bodhisattva is born on the southern continent of Jambudvipa. And why, monks, did the Bodhisattva examine the country of his birth? Because a Bodhisattva is not born in outlying lands where people are as stupid as sheep, with dull faculties, ignorant and incapable of distinguishing right from wrong. Rather, a Bodhisattva is born in the central land. And why, monks, did a bodhisattva examine the family of his birth? Because a bodhisattva is not born into an inferior family like a family of outcasts, flute makers, cartwrights, or servants. A bodhisattva is only born into one of two families, a priestly family or a family of the ruling class. When the priestly families are dominant in the world, the bodhisattva is born into a priestly family. When the ruling class families are dominant in the world, the bodhisattva is born into a ruling class family. Thus, monks, at this time the ruling class families were dominant in the world, so bodhisattvas were born into such families. In this manner, the bodhisattvas and gods observe all the illustrators' royal families to be found throughout the 16 kingdoms of Jambudvipa, and found them all to be inadequate. As they considered this, a god named Jana Katudawa Davaja, who was firmly established in a great vehicle and could not be turned away from awakening, spoke to the great assembly of gods and bodhisattvas. Come, my friends, let us go before the bodhisattva himself and ask him what sublime qualities a precious family must have in order for a bodhisattva to take his final birth there. So I guess if this was a movie scene, you would have all the Buddha's retinue, his court, all the other bodhisattvas and gods. They would be busy looking down at earth and comparing notes, and trying to find out who would be a suitable family for the Buddha to be born into, and they could not find a single one. Yeah, okay. And looking upon the great assembly of bodhisattvas and the great assembly of gods, the bodhisattva then addressed the gathering, friends, the family into which a bodhisattva takes his final birth must have 64 excellent qualities. What are these 64 qualities? Okay, before we move on, there was the Buddha's mother, known as Lady Maya, apparently. I don't have the source, but I think Shofu mentioned it. It might be in the Lotus Sutra. Apparently, Lady Maya made a vow that she would become the mother of all Buddhas. Wait, I didn't say that exactly right. That she would give birth to all future Buddhas. So she made a vow. So if any one of you, has ever thought of such a vow and you are not sure how to carry it out, right now you're going to go into the qualities of a family that benefit that the what's the word for it? Benefiting of a Buddha. Yes, that's the word. Benefiting of a Buddha, that's the term. And it applies to the mother as well, because I'm not sure if I included a slide on the qualities of the mother. I think I might have, but that's not right now. So this family must be noble and it must be known by all. It must not be petty or prone to violence. It must be of a good caste and good clan. It must have excellent marital unions, with excellent marital unions in the past and marital unions between individuals who are pure. These marital unions must be between people who are both pure, well known by all, and renowned for their great power. This family must have many men and women. It must be fearless, not base or cowardly. It must not be greedy but disciplined. It must be wise and watched over by ministers. This family must be creative and thereby enjoy worldly pleasures. This family should be steadfast in its friendships and safeguard the lives of all the beings throughout the animal kingdom. So not just humans, but animals as well. They must have gratitude and know how to conduct themselves appropriately. They must not be moved by ambition, anger, ignorance, or fear. They must be afraid of engaging in negative deeds. They must not dwell in ignorance. This family must be benevolent and industrious. It must be inspired to give, be generous, and remember the kindness of others. They must be physically strong with great power and strength, indeed supreme strength. They must make offerings to the sages, to the gods, and to stupas, and also pay homage to their ancestors. They must not hold grudges. So, another even the family, the future family of the Buddha is, as you can see, is no ordinary family. You know, how you say, it's very, very rare to encounter like a clan with those qualities. That's why the gods and the bodhisattvas said they couldn't find any family that was suitable. And the Buddha said, this family must be renowned throughout the 10 directions and have a vast retinue. It must not be divided. It must be peerless. This family must be the most senior and the most illustrious among all families. It must be powerful and renowned as such. They must respect their fathers, mothers, mendicants, and priests. They must have great stores of treasure and grain. They must have a great deal of gold and many jewels, gems, pearls, lapis lazuli, conchs, crystals, corals, fine gold, silver, and many other riches and belongings. They must have many elephants, horses, camels, oxen, and sheep. They must have many male servants, female servants, officials, and workers. This family must be difficult to defeat. It must accomplish all of its aims. It must be a family of universal monarchs. It must be aided in great measure by the root virtues accumulated in the past. It must be descended from a noble family, a family of bodhisattvas. Indeed, this family must be irreproachable when it comes to any accusations or faults related to one's birth, such as those found in this entire world with its gods, demons, and brahmas, mendicants, and priests. Friends, the family of a bodhisattva in its final existence must have these 64 qualities. Wow, okay. The bodhisattvas and gods, having heard the bodhisattva explain the attributes of the pure family and the pure mother, thought to themselves, where can a family with the qualities described by this holy being be found? Pondering this question, they then thought, the seat of the Shakyas is wealthy, prosperous, agreeable, and pleasant. It has bountiful harvests and is teeming with people. Its king, Suddhodana, descends from pure families on both his mother's and father's side. His wife as well is pure. His deeds are not swayed by the afflictions, and he bears excellent physical characteristics. Extremely wise and endowed with brilliant merit, the king comes from an illustrious family and is descended from a line of universal monarchs. So apparently, the Buddha's family, in the distant past, don't know how many great grandfathers before the Buddha was born. One of them was actually a genuine universal monarch. So they come from their lineage is really pure. So it says he has incalculable wealth and treasures and innumerable precious jewels. He believes in karma and does not hold negative views. He rules over all the lands of the Shaka clan and is honored and revered by all the merchants, householders, ministers, and people in his court. He is kind and handsome, neither too old nor too young. He has a fine body and every excellent quality. He is knowledgeable concerning crafts, astrology, the self, the Dharma, the truth, the world, and science. Indeed, he is a Dharma king who guides according to the Dharma. Maya Devi, which is the Buddha's future mother's name, is reserved, free of anger, pride, conceit, and arrogance. She does not get indignant or jealous. Rather, what she says is timely, and she gives generously. She is disciplined and devoted to her husband, unconcerned with other men. Her head, ears, and nose are perfectly symmetrical. Her hair, as black as a bee, frames a fine forehead. And then I have not included the rest of the sutra, but basically they praise her for her physical qualities. And actually, for the first time, I have run out of slides. This is where I have chose to stop sharing the one perspective of our teacher, the Buddha. So the reason I have shared this is we sometimes take the Buddha for granted, and we never pause, or we never follow the practice of mindfulness of the Buddha and what that actually means. And in the case of where we are generating loving kindness for ourselves, to know that that our teacher is such a great person. We can have multiple teachers. For example, like Shufu is one of our teachers, right? To know that one of our teachers is, we know he's a great man, no? But to what extent do we actually know? To what extent have we actually paid any attention, or among the myriad thoughts that float through our mind or consciousness throughout the day, how many of them are actually about how awesome the Buddha actually is? Because the more we think about the awesomeness of the Buddha, the great virtue of the Buddha, and everything he had to go through to be who he was, and it was all, it's not, he didn't do all of it out of how you it's not to be like the best person in the world, but it was all done with the aim to lead, to save living beings. And this is a practice that if we take time out of our daily schedule to actually pay some attention to, pay some thoughts to it, then it becomes a very, very powerful practice for us to ground ourselves, especially as a foundation where we know we have done something right by trusting someone who is, as we saw in the slides today, who is absolutely peerless in the world, unless you compare him to other Buddhas and other great bodhisattvas. If not, among every other belief, you can't really find, at least for me personally, I'm not aware of how someone is even described at the same level. Okay, all right. So, do we have any questions at this time?
Sure. If we want to read about this sutra, Bhakti Vistara Sutra, can we go to, where would we find it?
Oh, where will you find it?
Yeah. Would it be in the access to insight.org, or is there a better site to find the sutra?
Okay, I'm going to share it in the WhatsApp group right now.
Okay.
And you can read it.
Okay.
You can read it from there. I've shared it before, and but I've just shared it again. Yeah. Anyone else? No one? Okay, so we come to Ron's question from 2 weeks ago. Ron's question was about what is the difference what is the spirit of the precepts, and what is the difference between holding the precepts and understanding the spirit of the precepts well. The spirit of the precepts means that you understand, you have right view on the precepts. It means you understand the whole point, the whole relevance of the precepts. You know what it's meant for. The other side is the letter. So that's usually the letter of the thing, the precepts, and then the spirit of the precepts. The letter of the precepts means the literal sense, the literal meaning of the words itself. So, for example, do not kill, so you don't kill. Do not harm living beings, you don't harm. You don't lie, so you don't lie. You absolutely don't lie. Okay. To some people, that means telling the truth all the time, but it doesn't mean that. You can keep your mouth shut and don't say anything. But some people who may not understand that, they think it's about telling the truth all the time, even if it may make other people upset. So that's holding the precepts strictly to the letter. So a lot of untoward things happen when people hold the precepts to the letter. And this usually happens when people are holding precepts for the first time. So what happens is, for example, you become a vegetarian. If you especially in our organization, they emphasize a lot on becoming a vegetarian. Then you go home and everyone else is not a vegetarian, and then you kind of impose your view on them, or you make them feel uh, inadequate, or there's some kind of friction that happens. So when you hold the precepts in that way, you make people around you unhappy. You start preaching to them, or whatever it is. Yeah, there are so many now ways it can go wrong. So that's holding the precepts strictly to the letter. But then holding the precepts to the spirit is very different, because you ask yourself, why are you holding the precepts? Why did the Buddha hold the precepts? Why is it said that bodhisattvas hold precepts on behalf of all living beings? And when you don't look at the precepts in isolation by itself, the 5 rules or the 5 guidelines, but you look at it in the context of the entire of the Buddhist teachings, the Buddha's teachings, and you realize that the foundation of any practice is the 4 Brahma Viharas: loving kindness, compassion, equanimity, and I can't pronounce that very well, and empathetic joy. Then you get a hint as to how you should hold the precepts. You're not meant to hold the precepts to cause afflictions to other living beings. In fact, you should never, in Buddhist practice, you should never oppress, never impose, and never create any afflictions to any living beings. That kind of perspective does not appear if you look at the precepts in isolation. And then when it comes to not lying, for example, the Buddha lied. The Buddha, there was the sutta where a young boy was on it walking, and he was going to fall into a hole. And the Buddha got the attention of the young boy by saying, "Oh, I have some sweets for you in my hand," which was not true. So technically, it was a lie, but if you look at the context, the Buddha saved the boy, so it wasn't a lie, because it was for the boy's benefit. But of course, you have to do these things in wisdom. Don't take that and say, "Oh, I can start lying now," because you may not have the wisdom to discern what is best for the other person. Okay. So holding the precepts to the spirit means that, like in the example I give, how do you want your loved ones to be treated as they go around? Do you want them to be treated by people who never harm them? So this example works even for 12-year-olds, because I tried it out on them. Do you want the people that you care about to always be surrounded by people who will never harm them, who never cheat them, who never lie to them, who never steal their things, and all these things? If the answer is yes, then that gives you an idea of what the spirit of the precepts are. So at the very least, you can be that person for everyone else. Okay. And at the same time, you can be that person for the people you care about too. So you can be the person for the people you care about, and you can be that person for the people other people care about. So you meet a stranger, you may not care about the stranger, but other people, this stranger is cared for by other people. And those people, if you ask them the same question, their loved ones, wherever they go, do you always want them to be surrounded by people who are trustworthy, etc., etc.? They will say yes. So then you realize that the precepts, the spirit of the precepts, take on a different dimension. It is about you realize that the spirits, the precepts truly reveal itself in relationship, because that's the only place where you find the precepts. So it's a very, very different dimension to holding the precepts to the letter, which can be very hard, very firm, with no consideration for other people's well-being. Okay. All right. Saha says, what happens when you break precepts because you have no choice? I'm not sure what no choice means in this place, but when you think that you have, first you have to be familiar with what it actually means when you think that you have broken the precepts. There are certain guidelines, how you say, certain conditions to fulfill to see if you have broken. For example, if you accidentally take something that was not given to you, but your intention in your heart was not to steal it, you didn't want to be possessive, it didn't occur to you, then even if someone accused you of stealing, then you have not stolen anything because your intention was not there. So first you have to be familiar with the guidelines surrounding what it means when they say you have violated the precepts. Then if you think that you have, then you can go in front of a monk or nun. If you're a woman, you go in front of a nun, that's more appropriate. If you're a man, you go in front of a monk, and then you can confess. You can say that, oh, I did this, kind of like the confession booth in the Catholic Church. You go in, you confess, and but you don't have to do any Hail Marys, and that's it. And then you try your best. So precepts are about trying your best. As long as you try your best, then if you break the precepts and then you try your best again to hold it well, what happens is over time it becomes a new habit. You plant new seeds that help you hold the precepts. And after a while, as you all will know, it becomes second nature. You don't have to think about it anymore. It becomes who you are. And that's how the Buddha became the Buddha. The Buddha, through a very, very long time of practicing wholesome deeds, at one point in his life, all this became second nature for him. It became natural. And from there, you just proceed on applying your new habits to everyone that you meet, and then it becomes effortless. Okay. So in Saha's case, you say, I have not taken the 5 precepts. You should not have any fear of the 5 precepts, of breaking the 5 precepts to prevent you from taking the 5 precepts. It's like someone saying, oh, I'm afraid of ingesting poison, I'll stop eating anything and drinking anything. The kind of logic is flawed logic. Yeah. So you shouldn't let that hold you back, unless you know for sure that you are unable to, because of certain circumstances, like say you might be, your only livelihood is chickens, and you can't, for the time being, you cannot give that up. Then maybe you take 4 precepts. You don't take that particular precept. Yes, Sahai, you want to say something, please?
Amitofo, Dharma Master, and everyone. My question is, how can I take the 5 precepts when you own a business and you have to deal with, a pretty much mundane world? That's why I haven't taken it, but I'm seriously thinking about it in September. But I'm just wondering, once I take the 5 precepts, does that mean I have to kind of not deal with the business world or anything else, like the livelihood anymore, kind of transfer it to someone else to be more safer that way?
Okay, honestly, based on your question, I don't think you understand what the 5 precepts are, because the 5 precepts are precisely for you to navigate the mundane world. It's not to be a monk or a nun, because those involve 200 or 300 precepts. But the 5 precepts are precisely there for lay people as they go about their daily lives, within the mundane world, if you want to use that term. But for anyone who has to go through a normal life, normal responsibilities, but they want to make sure that they plant wholesome seeds so that their current and future existence will be a wholesome one. That's what the 5 precepts are for. So
Okay, I understand, Dharma Master. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's just I'm scared to kind of take it, because what if I make mistakes? What if I have to do something that's going to break my 5 precepts?
Yeah, so you won't be perfect. The only thing you can do is you try your best. Because okay, the way karma works is you plant seeds. Okay, so say someone who's a petal, not petal, that's the wrong term. Someone who can't help himself but lie all the time. Okay, you cannot help yourself that you lie all the time. You take the 5 precepts. Okay. Oh yeah, you can use that term. I don't know how to pronounce it. Petal, you know, when it says someone's petal. Can someone help me pronounce that word? You know what word I'm referring to? A liar, a pathological liar. Is that how you say it?
Yes, Dharma Master. It's called a pathological liar.
Pathological liar. Yeah, someone who lies and feels bad about it, but they can't help themselves. So people like that are the ones who need to take the precepts. Why? Because when you have taken the precept and you have done it with a sincere heart, sincere mind, with proper intention, you're aware that you have taken the precepts. It's like a rock hanging over your head. But at the same time, you still have your habits. Okay. And like I said, the way karma works is it is seeds. So you get to a point where someone asks you a question, and to protect your ego, or to you did something wrong but you don't want people to find out, what happens is the habit comes very, very quickly. And before you realize it, your habit controls the things that you do or say. So this person who lies all the time, without thinking about it, lies. And then, oh, I did it again, but I'm not supposed to because I've taken the precepts. I'm so useless. You know, I can't even hold this precept. I'm so scared of falling into the hell, blah, blah, blah. All these thoughts become preventive seeds. They're actually good. Okay, so out of one, okay, don't take my word for it, but this is my logic. Out of one bad deed comes many wholesome seeds that follow. And after a period of time, this person becomes used to having a pause. Before they lie, they say, oh, wait, I've taken the precepts. And over time, they change. Over time, they're able to control themselves more. And then eventually they come to a point where they become in control rather than their habit controlling them. Or they make a new habit of not lying. And it's only because that in the past they have taken the precepts that they have come to that position now. So if you follow twisted logic instead, someone says, oh, I'm so scared because I can't stop myself from lying. Then the person says, oh, I'm not going to take the precepts. And then guess what? The person is just going to follow the habit till the end of time, till they die. Then in the next life, they still have this same habit over and over again. Because they never give themselves the opportunity, despite their fear, to try to change. Okay? So don't worry about breaking the precepts. Worry that you're not trying your best. That's it. Because eventually when you do, you are able, there's a sutra that the Buddha talks about precisely this principle. I have to look for it. The Buddha talks about, maybe I'll share it in the next class if that's the right sutra and I can find it. The Buddha talks about something like once you have taken it, then you don't have to worry about all the things you have done in the past, something like that. Yeah. So it's better to take and transform over a period of time and eventually get there rather than not take, because in the short term you're afraid and then you just stab yourself in the back and, you know, end up for lifetime after lifetime not doing anything. Okay. All right. So time to dedicate merit. Let me get the slides. So when it comes to the Dharma, you have to make certain decisions, like taking the precepts, taking refuge, when you're ready and you're presented with the opportunity to take the Bodhisattva precepts, the only advice that I have is don't think, just do, because it's something good for you, and if you use your own logic to try to figure things out, whether you should do it or not, just look at where you are and where your own logic has gotten and you're not enlightened yet. So just trust in the Dharma instead. Okay. Gonna put my palms together. Oh, no, wrong slide. All right. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see, our hands and hearts can find in giving unity. May our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light dispel the darkness of our endless night. Because our hearts are one, this full of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. 3 bows to the Buddha. Second bow. Third bow. Half bow. Bowing respect to the Venerable Master. Second bow. Third bow. Half bow. Okay, everyone, I'm so happy to see you all joining us online today. We'll see you next week. Ame Tofo.